Hi, it's Michael Waitze. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am awesome. So, Lucy, do you want to give a little bit of background for the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Lucy Lin. I'm the founder of Forestlyn, and very nice to be talking to you today.
It's my pleasure.
I am Australian, so I am from Sydney. I really would like to try and help projects communicate better, because I do find that there's a lot of technical people in our industry, in the blockchain and cryptocurrency industry. So I'm here as a marketing and communications professional and try to communicate their projects in a way that is more consumer friendly.
And can you just back up a little bit and just tell me how you got to here, right? So, you run your own company. It's a blockchain and cryptocurrency marketing company. I'm sure you're extremely busy, particularly over the past 18 months. Like, what was it about the cryptocurrency that interested you and the blockchain stuff that interested you?
Prior to blockchain, I guess I'll start from the very beginning. I actually have an undergrad in communications,
Yep.
so that's my first start. And then I worked 15 years in marketing.
Oh, wow.
So I've worked all around the world. I've worked in Japan. I've worked in the UK. I've worked in Canada. I'm Australian, and I was actually born in Taiwan. So I'm very much of a global citizen. I've worked in large corporate organizations such as American Express, worked at financial institutions like AMP, it's a listed Australian company. I've worked
Yep.
at Qantas Airways, National Airline of Australia. I've worked at Here Technologies. I've worked in insurance companies, law firms, etc. Um, and I came into the first time I've heard about Bitcoin was in about 2013, 2014. I was looking at my Instagram the other day, and I actually have a photo of me posting something on Instagram saying, "Should I buy it?"
Did
Because I
you?
was in. Well, I didn't, unfortunately. That is
Neither
a.
did
I
I,
don't
by the way.
regret. Yeah, I don't regret a lot in my life, but I did regret that decision.
Fair enough.
Um, but I lived in Toronto for 3 years, which and I'm actually Canadian permanent resident still. And yeah, and like being in Toronto, um, is there's a lot of tech. It's a very big startup scene. It's one of it's home of it's home of Ethereum. Like, as Vitalik is there, Joe Loban from Consensus is from Toronto as well. So there's a lot of very smart people from there. And when I was living there, that's when I first heard about it from all the startup meetups I used to attend. And yeah, and so that was kind of like my first time I've really heard about it. And then I kind of still stayed in my corporate space, and I was doing all different types of marketing in corporate, like in acquisition and in loyalty and
Right.
partnerships and community and in all these things. And then about a year ago, I was like, you know what, I really feel like this is something that's going to be very big. And you could see the momentum of last year as well, that it was just growing and growing. And yeah, and I made the switch into blockchain and crypto about a year ago now, and yeah, I've been down this rabbit hole ever since, I guess. So
Well,
it's
so look, I worked in corporate America, not corporate America. So I worked in big corporates for 20 something years as well. And
mm,
when I finally decided to leave in 2011, end of 2011, beginning of 2012, it led to a completely different mindset for me for starting my own companies and ventures and stuff like that. Was it a big
yeah.
adjustment for you going from big corporate work to running your own company?
Yeah, it has been, to be honest. Like, because you're so used to having all these processes done for you, having HR, you've got your finances sorted out, you've got leads to, handed down to you, all
Right.
these things, and now I have to do everything. So that has been probably the biggest switch. It's not the marketing. The marketing is something I've done for a long time, so that to me has been the easiest bit. hardest bit is running your own business, like, chasing after the clients, sorting out my finances, like doing the invoices, chasing the invoices, all these like types of things where I can just hand off to other departments previously. Now I have to do it myself, and which has been, a big shift for me in my career, but something that's quite rewarding, I have to say, because, it's something I've been thinking about for a while. And prior to this, like I have done things on the side. So I actually founded a award-winning energy mobile app previously, but that wasn't a full-time. Like I was still working at American Express in a full-time gig and doing that part-time. But this is like, in the last year, I have been doing this full-time for myself and working with lots of different clients. So completely different jump, I guess.
Right. I mean, I talk a lot about how when I was sitting on a trading desk at Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs, I used to think that, the reason why clients would come was because of me. And I didn't realize until after I left that I probably didn't have that much impact. It was more the brand name for whom I was working. Like that franchise really matters. And now that you're building your own brand, right? Forestlyn. I love the name, by the way, and I love the logo. Well, it's just it's green. It's kind of a play on words on your name as well, which is kind of cool.
So just letting you know, Lin, my last name, in Mandarin Chinese, it means forest, and so it's a play on my surname, Forestlyn. So, yeah.
Right. So the Chinese character
has to be green.
The Chinese character for Lin is two trees next to each other. Yeah.
Two trees. Yeah. So one tree is wood, and two trees is pretty much. One tree. One of the symbols is a tree, and then two together is woods or forest. Yeah.
And then three is just like massive forest.
Yeah,
but I like
forest. National Park.
Yeah, national park. So I like the play on words, and I like the green. So you said you've been doing this now for a year and a bit, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And you've been traveling all over the world. Do you give speeches on blockchain and on Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I've been asked to be on quite a few panels, and in the last year, like it has been ups and downs in the last year, and I think we've all experienced this. It has been a lot of ups at the beginning, and then the last little bit has been not as much as previously. But yeah, I mean, I've been to quite a few different conferences in New York, and then I was just in Malta, and plus, like, with clients, I've been all over. Like I was, went to France, I was in LA quite a bit. So quite a lot of back and forth between that and where I'm living. But at the moment, you kind of just don't really have a home.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to ask you, right? So based in Australia, and, air travel is one of those things that hasn't really changed that much in the past 30 or 40 years, right? So planes haven't gotten that much. So the internet is like, right. So if planes had developed as fast as the internet have, you'd be able to get to Malta in about 35 minutes, but that hasn't happened. So what has the traveling been like for you?
It's been tiring. Like my last trip to Malta, I think my trip was already 30 something hours because I have to fly from Sydney to Bangkok, Bangkok to Cyprus, Cyprus to Malta. No, sorry, Bangkok to Dubai, Dubai to Cyprus, Cyprus to Malta. And I was delayed going into Dubai for about 45 minutes. And because of that delay, I only had a 1.5 hour changeover between the flights. And I had missed that flight, and there was about 10 of us all on the flight, and we were stuck. And the airline was like, "Oh, you can stay in Dubai for, a night. We'll put you in a nice hotel." I'm like, I want to get to Malta.
Right, I'm not here to be in Dubai.
I know. They want us to spend more in Dubai. So yeah, then I had to get me on the next flight to Malta ASAP, and then I had to fly an extra. They found me another flight, and I went to Athens, and that's another leg. So I added on an extra 9 hours to my flight. So in the end, the whole thing was about 38 hours. So from when I left my home in Sydney to when I actually arrived, it was just so long.
Wow.
I know. And you just lots of people complain about travel, but Australia really is so far. So
yeah, I think about it a lot actually, because I lived in Japan for 20 something years, and even that was a a long distance flight to most places, but Australia
Yeah.
added another leg, right? Because you had to go
Well,
from either
yeah,
Sydney or somewhere.
Australia to Tokyo. I just did that in May. I was in Tokyo. That was like 9, 10 hours. So yeah.
What is your client acquisition like? In other words, how do you, when you're flying all over the world, and the blockchain space is uniquely global, right? Because it's all about decentralization. There
hmm
are some pockets, right? So Switzerland, Malta, Estonia, in places where there's a lot of activity, Singapore as well. But how
Yep.
do you go about client acquisition? In other words, how do people find out about you, and how do you find out about them? And then how do you figure out which are the right projects to focus on?
Yeah, so a lot of these things are done by word of mouth and networks. And I think, like anything, like, in the corporate world, it was like that as well. It's always kind of like who you know. And so that has been really good. And plus, like, I've worked on successful projects that's raised money. So now I've got a fairly good word of mouth. And so that has been really beneficial. And then just like getting your networks to refer you has been the way to go. When you go to a lot of these events, and honestly, there's like an event every week somewhere in the world.
There is.
Um, so you can sit on the plane your entire life, and you would not run out of place like events to attend. But that's not. It's good, but then it's not also worth your time. So going to events and meeting new people, that's also been a good way as well. And I think the face to face is still quite important. I think humans still like human interaction, and I do. And that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing. You can't hide behind your computers all the time, I think. So I think the face to face is still has that element. But other things, like, you just have to put out really good content. So, your blogs, your social media channels, getting on
Right.
podcasts and talking, etc. So all these
It's a really
helps.
good idea, right? Do you have, so I've noticed over the past few years I've developed this event fatigue. I still go. But do you feel
Mm.
like there's a
But
little
how
bit of
many do you go to now?
I mean, often, and I, like you, I get asked to speak at places like in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Bangkok. And Bangkok has actually become quite a good center of events for blockchain. There's a big and bustling and kind of dynamic community here.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I was just there.
right? And you could just
Yeah.
spend all day, every day speaking at conferences. And,
Mm.
like you, I run a business in this space. So, and I've been doing it for a while. So
Yeah.
it's just constant contact, right? I was at an event 2 nights ago where I was speaking a little bit and asking questions and stuff. I feel like there's a little bit of fatigue. I'd like to see it kind of get drilled down to maybe, you know, 30% of what's going on right now and have people out there actually building things as opposed to just going to events and kind of talking about it so much. But everything needs a balance, right?
Well, honestly, I think this year people have been building. If you look at the difference between last year and
Tell me.
this year people are like, people are heads down. A lot of the projects I know are really focused on building, especially the ones that's raised money. They're now trying to, build their product, get the mainnet out. Whereas last year it's all about all these new projects. Any new project, two guys in a garage is going to come in with a white paper, and thousands of people are chucking in their money into the project. And with the FOMO, I don't. That's not really happening this year. I think this year has been a lot less quiet than last year has been. And I do think people are building right now.
Right. I mean, one of the guys that I talked to a couple of days ago said that the peak of the euphoria in no way represents I think we talked about this a couple of days ago, the actual implementation phase. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, and I kind of agree. And I do think that people have their heads down now, and I think that the fact that there's kind of less volatility in the cryptocurrencies from the value side of the market, and I think people are out there just trying to establish who's going to build the best projects now. And that's better for the market overall, but it's also better for marketing. In other words, there's less noise out there, so there are more
Yeah.
signals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And like, a lot of all this is all about marketing is trying to build as big a community group you can, as many signals in the market to the investors so they can invest, right? But you also need to have a working product that actually works and is a good idea. So it's a good balance of the two of them. And right now I think it's all about needing to build trust. So trust that, and I say trust because we've seen a lot of hacks, we've seen a lot of scams, unfortunately, in our industry. And when people see easier money or they see, not as much regulation, or they see loopholes, and there's always going to be people trying to get in there with a shortcut. So that's why I think you see the scams and the scams, and taking advantage of some more vulnerable people.
Right.
But right now, trust is such a huge thing, I think, and people do want to see working products. Like I said, if you don't right now, if you have the same thing as you did last year, like I say, the two guys in a garage and a white paper, that's not going to raise anything anymore.
No,
You
it's
need
not.
to, no, 100%. Like, no one's going to put any money into you. Why should they? And it's maturing, and I like that, because it should be. And I think as the industry goes, it's hopefully maturing more and more every year.
Do you see differences regionally? So I think you travel globally a lot more than I do, right? I kind of stay in this region. So I kind of
Okay,
feel like
yeah,
I feel like I've got a pretty good pulse on what's going on in Southeast
yeah,
Asia. Your travel's
okay, yeah,
taking much further afield. Do you get do you get a
yeah.
sense like there are different pockets of sort of enthusiasm or different types of projects happening in different places globally?
Right now, what's happening is Malta, I think. I mean, I just came back from Malta. They had a big event there called the Delta Summit. And right now, they've got the Malta Blockchain Summit, and there's a lot of noise about the country, because their president's involved, their prime minister's very visible. Like, everybody's there. Like, when I went to the Delta Summit, the prime minister actually opened the summit and says, "Welcome everybody to Malta. We welcome you." And they're very into being very crypto friendly and blockchain friendly. And I met one of the instigators of the term blockchain island, how he got through all this. Like, I actually interviewed him on my own YouTube site, Forestlyn. I just think it's like one of those places now that's very talked about, especially all the exchanges are kind of like relocating themselves there and setting themselves up there. It's quite an interesting space, and I think a lot of people are talking about it, and is there. So if they're not at DevCon right now, they're in Malta. They're the two places this week that they're in for events.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the population of Malta. It's less than 500,000 people.
Yeah, and
I'm just
they're going to grow really fast. And the thing is, with these types of countries, and I was listening to, because I'm Taiwanese, and so I've got interest in Taiwan, and I was listening to the crypto congressman Jason Su in one of his interviews, and same thing. Like, these smaller islands wants to differentiate themselves. So to differentiate themselves, what do? Is that they, become a lot more blockchain and crypto friendly, and get the projects to go there, and then they've got funds to give to startups who, start their projects there and create innovation, because that's how you, innovation and blockchain and crypto is hand in hand. I think a lot of politicians are quite interested in it, because they want to continue their innovation, and also attract a lot of very smart people to their countries.
What was your experience like? You said you were in Japan recently as well, right? As you know, I lived there for 20 something years, so I have a view on how fast things get done there. I was in a regulated industry there as well, in finance. So I'm just curious what your experience was like there recently.
Yes, I was just in Tokyo, and I wasn't there for very long, but I lived there 13 years ago, 13 to
Okay.
15 years ago. I was in Tokyo, and it's always one of the forefront countries, and I love going back there. It changes so much every time I go back. But over there, I just see that, it's mainstream. Like, I saw ads on billboards for, like, Bitcoin exchanges, whereas I never see that walking down the street in Sydney. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's different in that sense. And I was in Bangkok, like, I told you I was in Bangkok 2 weeks ago,
Yep.
and even walking around Bangkok, there's ads for the consumers saying, "Oh, come buy our real estate," with your Bitcoin. So, and to me, that is a lot more mass market. than some other places. Like I haven't seen that here in Sydney yet, for example. That's when you go, okay, so there's a lot more mass market and mass adoption when you see things like that, when they're actually advertising these huge, there's these two huge billboards that was just over the Roppongi Bridge, you know.
Right.
And so you can't miss it. To me, like, you know, that was an indication of mass market. And everyone
Right.
talks about, well, when is mass adoption going to come in? And more things like that, I think will make it. So we'll make it so. We'll make it happen.
I think so too. And I was in Japan a bunch of times last year. In particular, I was in Fukuoka for a few days, and there was a bike shop where the owner of the bike shop was a Bitcoin enthusiast. He had a Bitcoin sign, on the front of his shop, and you could rent a bicycle there using Bitcoin. So he took cryptocurrency to do it. I thought that was pretty amazing. And in Bangkok, as you said, people are building entire businesses, and big businesses here are getting very involved in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space, to the extent that even the government, from a regulatory standpoint, so the SEC and sort of the financial regulators, are saying, you know, they've actually created a framework which is ahead of some of the frameworks that some of the other countries in the world have created to manage the raising of capital, so ICOs or STOs or whatever they're being called these days, in the crypto space. So it's a great place for me to be, because I can see that development happening real time, and to the extent that you're connected to those authorities, it's great to watch, right?
Yeah, and I think the good thing about Australia is that you know, our ASIC, it's not the most friendly, but it's also not the most controlling. So with the Australian blockchain crypto scene, there's a lot of activity here as well. I mean, I've been to lots, like, you know, I was at actually yesterday was the Bitcoin white paper's 10th birthday.
Yep.
And so there was at least 4 or 5 different events just in Sydney alone. And I went to as many as I could, and which was great, you know, because there's definitely a scene here, and there's a lot of very smart projects coming out of Australia, not just in Sydney, but like in Melbourne, and also in Brisbane, and, you know, some in Adelaide as well. And so there's definitely things that's happening. And, you know, it really, I think, but your government regulations definitely helps in terms of the innovation and how many projects I think there is. Otherwise, people would just go somewhere else.
Yeah, and they can. So that was the other thing that people talk to me about is, should I do an ICO or should I raise money in Thailand? And I just keep telling them, look, the crypto market is uniquely global. It's not like you're raising money in one particular market. Even from a venture capital perspective, sure, there are venture capitalists in Singapore, and it's the VC market actually tends to be very regional, but the crypto market isn't, I think.
So from your consumer base, like that's global. You're global from day one.
Sure.
I think from a VC perspective, you still, like, you know, it's concentrated to a few areas, and a lot of the projects will still need to go to these concentration of VCs to ask for money. But as a project, your audience is global from day one. And that's where I think I could really assist, because I'm a global citizen and I've lived in, how many continents have I lived in?
You've lived in a lot, right? I was just going through this in my head. So you've lived in North America. You're
North
from
America,
Taiwan.
Asia,
You've lived in Asia.
Australia,
You've lived in Japan, Australia. Like, it was
Europe.
5 or 6 different
I've
places.
So I've lived
You lived
in
in
4.
London, right?
Yeah, I have. Yeah. So 4 out of 6 continents. So yeah, so I've lived in 4 out of 7 if you're counting Antarctica, which you may or may not count.
I don't think that counts, actually, because I don't think anybody really lives there. And if they do, they have their own issues. So let's just leave it at that.
Only scientists live there.
Only scientists live there.
From day one, your project, you're a global business, and so you need to be able to make sure that you're positioning yourself right, and you've got your right messages in there, and that you're targeting, you know, the retail, like you're targeting the everyday investors, your retail investors, your institutional investors. You're also targeting, you know, your VCs, and you've got your community members, and you've got influencers, and whoever you're trying to target. All of those, every single target audience and group will need different messages, and so that's quite important to keep in mind for a lot of these projects.
Well, and somewhere where you're an expert as well. when you're traveling around the world, whether you're in Malta or in Canada or in Tokyo or in Bangkok, and you're going to these conferences and you look around the room, and I ask this because I do this every day as well for my business, do you see a lot of other women there? And secondly, do you see a lot of other women from Asia there?
The woman in blockchain question comes up, I think, quite a bit, and I'd love to see more women in all the events that I go to.
Right.
So I'm quite passionate about that. So for example, like I was at New York Blockchain Week in May. It was like 8,500 people there, and you could tell that there's not very many women there because every time I went to the bathroom, there was no line.
Right.
No
Right.
line at all. And whereas the men's, they were like lined out the door, down the hallway, etc. And I've never seen that before.
And I don't know if it's a generational thing where we have to wait until the current generation of young ladies and even going back to girls kind of graduate, go through school, get experience, then move into that space. And as they do, look, 52% of the people on the planet are women, right? 48% are men. So at some point it has to even out. And I want to be part of that process to even it out. And that's why I ask the question, right? Is that how do you make that happen? And I don't think there's a silver bullet answer, but I want people to talk about it because I want to get a different perspective, right? Again, I don't know what it's like. All I know what it's like is to be me. I try to figure
Yeah,
out what the difference is, right? That's why I ask.
yeah. My last corporate role was at a technology company, and I was a regional manager.
Right.
And for International Women's Day, I did a presentation about women in STEM, basically.
Okay.
If you look at some of these numbers for boys and girls, I'm just looking at this graph. It's got, I think, 65% of boys were interested in STEM, whereas 35% of girls were interested in STEM. And then by the time they go through their degrees and their working life and they become execs, only 11% of females are in exec positions in STEM, where it's 89% of males. So somewhere along the line between being interested and becoming an exec, it's very dismal. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if the numbers of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, where these numbers for like IT executives, there's probably about 10%, if less, of females, because I go to a lot of events. I'm one of the few women that's there.
Right.
And there's definitely a growing number, and I'd love to see more women,
More. So would I.
but there's just a very small percentage. The number of women in IT and STEM is one problem, but then because blockchain and crypto is even more specialized,
Right. It's very specific.
it's very specific, and you're going to see even less females in this
Right.
space.
More
Um,
bifurcation.
yeah, and the thing is that with blockchain and crypto, I think people think, oh, it's so complex. It's even like it's not just STEM or IT. It's like very specialized. Like, how am I ever going to be in there or fit in there? But I actually think this industry needs everybody. It's not just the developers. They need the investment bankers like you. They need the marketers like me. They need the media personalities. They need the HR people. They need recruiters. They need lawyers and compliance people. They need everybody, to come into this space, because honestly, it's just going to be another industry that's going to grow. It is right now at its very infant stage.
Right. It
And
is.
so yeah, perhaps it's like because it's new tech, it's high tech. Just looking at those type of things, if it's high tech and new tech, a lot of the stats also show that men are more likely to be in these type of industries. But I do think more women will come into this space, and women are natural educators as well. Like, part of what I like to do is to educate more about this space, but also make it a lot more user friendly and easier. And I do hope the tech, as it keeps being built, is going to be a lot easier to use. And as a result of being easier to use, more people will come in as well.
Right. So then you have to do me a favor. As you travel around the world and you meet women in the space, let me give them a platform where they can talk about their experiences in the blockchain and crypto world. That would
Yeah,
help me
for
out a lot.
sure.
That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, referrals, everywhere I can, like on my website, I put other women on there, you know,
Yeah,
so
it's
it's not
important.
just all men, because like, women need to see other women in it as well. More than happy to do that. And plus, like, I think some of the events, like, I don't know if you heard about this, but I think it was the Bitcoin Miami event last year. Like, their after party was at a strip club, I
Right. So you
think.
can't do this. So I've been
You can't
I'm
do
I'm gonna
that.
I'm
You
gonna jump in.
can't.
I'm gonna jump in on this for a second. Okay. So I went to an event in Singapore a couple of years ago. It doesn't matter which one it was, and the after party was at a at a place where I would not have had an after party. And I think that it's incumbent upon people that are running these events to understand that when you publicize the event both before and after, you don't publicize. And again, maybe this is just going to make me sort of, I don't know, a crusty old man, but the idea is to share information and to create networking, not to have like a drunken party afterwards. I just want to leave it at that. That's my opinion. People can argue with me about it, but I think the idea is if you're traveling all over the world, let's just get stuff done.
Yeah, but it's also to be inclusive as well. It's like,
Agreed. And
being
it's you
getting
cannot
getting
have a
stuff
party in a
done,
strip
but then
club.
also
Cannot
being
do.
professional. And and it's not very inclusive if you're going to places
No.
like that.
No.
So, and plus, like, you won't be able to get the mass adoption that this industry craves for and needs if it's unfortunately going to be, promoted like that. So that event organizer was just catering to his male audience, probably in the early 20s. But, like, as more people come into this space, professionals are coming in. Like, I've worked 15 years in corporate, so it's not going to be some young kid who's just finished their degree or still in their university degree, and they've just has been a wonder dev whiz.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the scene is also changing as well.
It is, and let's just leave it at this. The cryptocurrency and the blockchain space, very similar to every other sort of embryonic industry, at some point gets institutionalized. Big institutions come in. We can argue about decentralization, but once it becomes sort of an institutional business, it becomes much more professional. Let's just leave it at that. And I think that's the way it
Correct.
should be.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it needs to grow up and it needs to have that balance.
Yeah. Look, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been an awesome conversation, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again.
Yes, of course. So yeah, so if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm very easily accessible on forestlyn.com. So Forestlyn.com. And I'm also on all the social media sites at Forestlyn1. You can find me there.